What is going on, trainers? DrumVillain here, bringing you some more Pokemon Go PvP content, and today I want to talk to you guys about the Johto Cup. Now, for those not in the know, the Johto Cup will be running for the last week of the season, leading up to the actual Go Tour Johto event this weekend. And if you've played previous seasons and played the Kanto Cup, it's pretty much the same premise where it's just any Pokemon in the Johto region is valid to participate in this cup. No other Pokemon are, and it will be in the Great League format, so 1500 CP and under. Now, the Kanto Cup's been fairly well received every time it's run. It's got a pretty unique, interesting meta, so I don't think I'm the only one hoping that the Johto Cup's going to be pretty good and quite fun as well for a last week to round off the season. Now, they have recently announced at Niantic that this season will be used to judge early entry participation for Pokemon Go World Championships this year. So if you do want to enter that and you haven't yet hit Legend rank, you're going to have to put your foot down a little bit, grind out in this last week and try and make that push. Niantic have also said that for the last couple of days of the season, you'll be able to do 100 battles a day, that's 20 sets, just to help you grind out any goals that you might have left it a little bit late to push towards. So in today's video, I'm just going to give you guys a quick look at some of the strongest picks for the Johto Cup, some of the most interesting spice picks for the Johto Cup, and a few team suggestions, as well as what I'm expecting to see people running, maybe to help you guys prep, maybe give you some ideas on building some teams yourself and be as ready as possible for this cup. But first of all, if you're new here, consider subscribing, helps me out massively. If you do enjoy the content, hit the like button, and let's take a look at some of the strongest meta picks first. First pick really goes without saying, and that's going to be Azumarill. Azumarill has long been one of the strongest picks in the Great League. Pretty much since Go Battle League was created, Azumarill has been one of the metas of the Great League in any cup it's allowed in. It's fantastically bulky, it's got great movesets, great coverage, and it's very, very versatile and can do pretty well even in some of its worst matchups. If you have an XL Azumarill, that is also eligible to participate as far as I'm aware, and that will do even better as it's got even more bulk and can get even more of those charge moves off. Second pick is going to be the actual highest rated Pokemon on PvPoke for this meta, and that's going to be Skarmory. Now, Skarmory, again, one of those Pokemon that's always been very strong in the Great League in any meta it's allowed in, and with a more limited meta and still making the cut, it's going to be even more dominant. Some of Skarmory's worst matchups like Galarian, Stunfisk and Bastiodon are nowhere to be found in this meta, so it's going to be even stronger than usual. That Brave Bird does monstrous damage to even some of its hardest counters, so Skarmory, you're going to have to be prepared for it if you're not bringing one yourself. Now, if you're looking at those two Pokemon and thinking, how can I beat both of those, look no further than Lanturn. The water electric typing gives it resistances against all of Azumarill's charge moves except Play Rough, gives it resistances against the flying and steel moves from Skarmory, and it has super effective damage against both of them thanks to that Thunderbolt. There are a lot of water types that are very strong in this meta, so Lanturn's going to be a core breaker for quite a few common teams that I do expect to see people running in this cup. Now, the one thing that Lanturn cannot handle is grass types, and that leads us to pick number 4, and that is going to be Meganium. Meganium is one of the strongest picks in the Great League in general, only slightly being overshadowed by Venusaur, but it is walled by flying types. Meganium is one of my personal favourite picks for the Great League, especially in the earlier seasons. It's also surprisingly bulky. It can survive an Ice Beam from Azumarill very, very comfortably, but you are going to need that Frenzy Plant legacy move to really make good use out of it. Now, probably the strongest Pokemon that you might not see as many of, it's going to be Wobbuffet, and that is because Wobbuffet is incredibly hard to access and build for this cup, because not only do you need a 100% IV Wobbuffet, it ideally needs to be a purified Wobbuffet, and it needs to be level 50 to keep up with the CP range of the Great League, because Wobbuffet has such a low general CP because it's all defense, it's all HP, it's disgustingly bulky, it has access to counter, which is a fantastic fast move that lets it get a lot of damage off over time. It lets it get to those charge moves relatively at a decent pace to really wear down opponents. It beats Skarmory, it beats Lanturn, it does lose to Azumarill, and it does lose to things like Meganium, but generally it can put in a lot of work in almost every neutral matchup. It is incredibly strong if you do have access to one. If you're looking for something that definitely is going to shut down Wobbuffet in this meta, look no further than Umbreon. And Umbreon's probably one of, if not my favourite Pokemon to use in the Great League overall since its inception. Umbreon is very, very strong, has access to Foul Play and Last Resort. It's only rated number 25 on PvPoke for this particular meta, but I do believe that comes down to the fact that Azumarill is very likely going to be everywhere, and Umbreon does lose that matchup, but if you do have access to that legacy move Last Resort, you can put a lot of work in and push it pretty close, and if they don't have Play Rough, you're going to get them pretty low. If not, you can actually flip if you manage to shield a Hydro Pump. Okay, now I want to talk to you guys about some of the Pokemon that don't normally get a chance to shine in Go Battle League, but in this meta are going to have quite a bit of play, are going to have some interesting counterplay to some of the top picks in general, and are going to be able to catch some people off guard if they're not expecting them or not ready for them. And the first one of those I want to talk about is Donphan, and Donphan recently got its moveset buffed slightly. I believe it got access to Body Slam that it didn't have access to before, and Donphan's got a pretty interesting moveset in having access to counter. It's got access to Body Slam, it's got Play Rough, it's got Earthquake, so it's got very generalized coverage, but Body Slam gives it a lot more play than it had before. It can now beat Skarmory, it can beat Lanturn, it can beat Umbreon. It does lose to waters and grasses because ground on its own isn't a particularly strong typing defensively, so it's got a lot of weaknesses to watch out for, but Donphan is a very strong pick in this meta and can put a lot of work in for you. Now, one of the most surprising picks I think in this meta is going to be Sudowoodo. I wouldn't have expected it to be particularly good, but then I realized it has access to counter, Rock Slide and Earthquake, which is a great moveset that gives it awesome coverage. It beats Skarmory, it beats any flyers, it beats Umbreon. It does a lot of work even in some of its harder losing matchups. It does lose against Azumarill and it does lose against the grasses, but again, it's one of those that's going to put a lot of work in against pretty much everything else. While we're talking about counters to Skarmory, we should also bring up Steelix, because Steelix has the same typing as Galarian Stunfisk, being Steel and Ground type. It's normally just not quite bulky enough for the Great League, but here it's got a lot of play. It has access to Dragon Tail, which is a great fast move. Crunch and Earthquake gives awesome coverage, can hit just about everything for neutral damage in some way or another. It can put a lot of work in against the meta, beats Umbreon, beats Skarmory, beats Lanturn. If they're running Spark, if they're running Water Gun on your Lanturn, you're going to have a bad time, and the same does go for Donphan in that respect. Now, if you want something that does beat those waters and grasses, consider Ariados. Now, Ariados does lose very, very hard to Skarmory, so you've got to have something else to deal with it on a team using Ariados, but Ariados has a great moveset. Poison Sting recently got buffed. It has access to Cross Poison, it has access to Mega Horn, access to Lunge if you want to be debuffing your opponent. I recently used it in the Love Cup, and if you've built one there, you might find some extra use for it here in this cup as well. Now, if you're feeling like your team needs a little more fast move pressure, consider Granbull, specifically Shadow Granbull, the only Shadow Charmer that's currently available. Actually, that's not true. There is Gardevoir, but we don't talk about Shadow Gardevoir. But Shadow Granbull, charm damage is absolutely disgusting, has great charge move coverage in close combat, and with Crunch can hit most things for monstrous neutral damage. It is glassy though, and if it gets caught against something like an Ariados or a Skarmory, it's probably going to have a pretty bad time. And last but not least is going to be Mantine. But Mantine is always, again, been a very strong pick in the Great League in general, but a little bit overshadowed by a lot of the other strongest picks around. Its access to Wing Attack, Bubble, and Bullet Seed, I believe, as fast moves, which is quite a variety of choice. I do believe Wing Attack is the best option for it though. Access to Bubble Beam, debuff as a charge move, got access to Ice Beam to hit the grass for nice big strong damage. It does beat Skarmory, I believe, if they do play out that matchup. It does also beat the grasses like Meganium because of that Wing Attack pressure, and it can put in a lot of work even in its losing matchups. It doesn't lose that hard. I did want to make a quick honourable mention to Noctowl and Magcargo, since they did both get move updates at the beginning of the season, probably with this cup specifically in mind. Noctowl got access to Shadow Ball and Magcargo got access to, I believe it was, Incinerate and Rock Tomb, which does make them pretty good, but you have to consider that Magcargo as a fire type still loses to Meganium, which is kind of crazy, but that is how spammy Meganium is and how squishy Magcargo is. If Stardust is no expense and you don't mind really burning through some resources, Raikou, and specifically Shadow Raikou over the regular one, is very highly rated in this meta. It beats Skarmory, beats Lanturn, beats all the waters except Quagsire, I believe. It's got pretty interesting coverage on what it actually beats. It has access to Wild Charge and Shadow Ball, which are going to hit very, very hard from a shadow attack weighted legendary in such a small CP meta. There are quite a few more interesting picks in this meta. I could spend all day talking about it, but I do want to keep this video at least relatively short for you guys. There are some honourable mentions like Quillfish and Quagsire. If you want to replace Meganium, you could run Blossom because he has access to Bullet Seed and Leaf Blade, which is a very nice combo. You could even run an XL Bayleaf with Razor Leaf if you want the fast move pressure. But yeah, let's take a look at some team compositions and talk a little bit about what we expect to see people running. Now, I do believe we're going to see the revival of a classic Great League team, the original Caleb Peng viral line, and that is Skarmory Double Grass. We don't have access to Shifter in this meta as a say swap, but you could run something like Blossom, or even use Meganium as your say swap and clear the path for a different grass type like Blossom or even Shadow. Bayleaf for something in the back for that spammy grass damage once you bait out a Skarmory and clear it out of the way. And you're also going to see an inverse version probably, which is going to be Skarmory Double Water, where you use a water type say swap to bait out a grass type like Meganium that Skarmory can then take care of, and your last water in the back can wreak some havoc. I believe another team that's going to be quite common is going to be Skarmory, Meganium and Azumarill. In pretty much any order, you could see any of these Pokemon on lead, on safe swap and in the back. These are just three of the strongest picks that people are probably already going to have built for the Great League in general. You could run this team, like I said, in Open Great League and it would do pretty well. So it's going to have solid play here, and you're going to have to be prepared to deal with all three of these Pokemon realistically in this cup. A team that I thought of when looking at the meta and that I think is going to have a lot of play is going to be Lanturn, Quillfish on the safe swap, and then Skarmory in the back. Quillfish is pretty unique in being a water type that beats grasses generally because of its poison typing and damage output. Skarmory is your hard cover for any grass types that do come into your Lanturn, and generally I think it's going to be a solid team that has decent counterplay to this meta. If you have access to these Pokemon, Shadow Granbull, Donphan and XL Wobbuffet would make a pretty solid lineup. Granbull can force its way through a lot of Pokemon with that charm damage. Donphan is great, versatile say swap coverage against a potential Skarmory lead, and then you've got Wobbuffet in the back that also does pretty well if it gets stuck against a Skarmory, or anything else does well against the steals and has pretty generalized good matchups. And finally, a core that I think is going to be very, very strong in this cup is Umbreon and Mantine. They have very nice coverage over most of each other's weaknesses. They pair very well with picks like Meganium, Hitmontop, Blossom, Wobbuffet, Quagsire. It depends on what you're running into that's really punishing those two choices. There aren't many things that do beat both Umbreon and Mantine, and the things that do, you're not going to see very many of because they're not particularly strong meta picks in general for this cup. So that's just a few of my thoughts on the meta and a few teams to help you guys get started, maybe inspire you on what you think you're going to run for this cup. Let me know if there's any choices you're looking forward to trying out that I've not mentioned, or any particular teams that you think are going to put in some serious work in this cup for you. Good luck in the last week of the season. If you're hoping to make Legend Rank, extra good luck to you. It's a very tough push and it's going to be quite competitive as people scramble for that last chance to rank up. As always guys, thank you so much for watching. If you're already subscribed to the channel, you're absolute legend. If not, hit the button, it's free, helps me out. If you've liked the video, hit the like button and I will catch all of you guys next time.